How big was the news of Juwuan James opting out?
It was big, and it was really bad for the Broncos because tackle has been a big problem for them. They took Garrett Bowles in the first round a couple of years ago. He's been terrible. He doesn't know how to play his position without holding. And right tackle has just been a mess. Elway has brought in Donald Stevenson and Menelik Watson, and none of these guys have worked out, and they've had injury problems. And then they signed James last year. He played, I think, 2, maybe 3 games last season. There was some disputes about was he healthy and should he be playing or not. So the Juwuan James era has been problematic. And then with him opting out this week, this team has no tackle depth. Elway didn't draft a tackle this year. He took 2 wide receivers with his first 2 picks, which we're all excited to watch those guys, but they had massive holes at tackle and they ignored it. So James opting out really weakens them. Now Garrett Bowles doesn't have to compete to win the left tackle spot. He's just going to be the starter. And again, he's been really bad. And right tackle is, as of right now, going to be Elijah Wilkinson, who's a swing tackle at best. They have no depth. There's no depth at that position whatsoever. So offensive line is a serious problem now for the Broncos.
Nate Kreckman with us. What were your expectations for Drew Lock, and how much does this hurt his cause?
My expectations are probably not as high as some, but I expect to continue to see him improve through the course of this season. I think that he's capable of leading this team to 8 or 9 wins this year, and then you just need something to go your way. Boom, you're a 10-win team, and you're making the playoffs. This offensive line thing is really concerning for him. Skill position-wise, they've gotten a lot better. You know, they drafted Jerry Jeudy. They drafted Hamler out of Penn State. Cortland Sutton is a star. We think Noah Fant's getting better at tight end. They signed Melvin Gordon, so Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay give you the 2-back combination. Like skill position-wise, they're getting a lot better. And I think their interior offensive line is actually pretty good. Dalton Reisner's a second-year guy, and then they paid Graham Glasgow from Detroit. Tackle is just a huge issue, and Pat Shurmur wants to use 3 wide receiver sets in this offense. That's mostly what he does, is single tight end, 3 wide receiver sets. You're asking a lot out of 2 really bad tackles if that's the kind of offense that you want to run this season. So is Locke going to have his growing pains? Of course he's going to continue to, and this adds a degree of difficulty he didn't need.
If it doesn't work out with Locke, like if he's a disaster, does John Elway then go the Peyton Manning route, and maybe the Raiders and the Broncos are competing to bring in Aaron Rodgers?
That's one option. There's also, if Locke doesn't work out and they're just terrible this year, then theoretically they're in top 5 pick territory. And then they start looking at, can they get into Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes or Fields or whomever that they could get at that point in the draft. They would have to go looking at that again. It is kind of one of the nice things about Drew Lock in this situation. This sounds weird to say, but the Broncos have been really crappy at quarterback for years now, but they've been wasting a ton of money at that position too. Like they paid Case Keenum, they paid Joe Flacco, they paid both those guys to be terrible. This year, if Drew Lock falters and isn't good and flames out, at least they didn't spend any money on it. I think the Broncos are spending less at quarterback than pretty much anybody in the league, and they won't have any money on the hook after that. So then they could theoretically jump back into the draft situation, and they're really no worse off. And, I'm talking to a town where, you guys follow the Raiders. It reaches a point where it's like, well, what's another year where you suck? What does it matter?
Nate Kreckman does sports radio for Altitude Sports Radio in Denver. Last one on the Broncos. We found out the other day on Monday that Mark Davis and the Raiders said no fans at the brand new stadium. Do we have any leads, any info on what's going to happen in Denver as far as fans being let in?
They have not closed the door on the possibility of there being fans. As of right now, it feels really, really doubtful. What they've been telling season ticket holders is hang on, basically. If we do have fans, it will be a limited capacity. We'll do some kind of lottery thing or whatever. And then it's like everything else right now in sports, Steve. They're kicking the can down the road just as far as they possibly can. My guess is September, those home games, you won't see any fans in the building. Maybe by October, November, they'll do okay. We've had some pretty encouraging COVID news this week here in Denver. There was another mask order that was put in place. The numbers, while they were going up and they're still higher than you'd like them to be, are in a little bit of a decent place. And so fingers crossed, there's a hope that maybe there'll be some fans, but there has not been a hard announcement yet.
Nate is one of the voices of Mountain West Conference sports, Mountain West Conference football and basketball. Nate, what's going on at Colorado State? We've got across the board a lot of complaints from within the program saying that Steve Addazio and the guys running CSU football not taking COVID seriously. What do you have on this?
All right, so that report came down yesterday. It was about 4 o'clock. It was the middle of my show. I mean, Steve, you know what this is like, right? When something huge breaks and you're like, oh crap, like in commercial break, you're trying to read this thing as fast as you possibly can and get yourself as informed as you possibly can. And ultimately what you just start doing is being like, okay, here are exactly what the allegations are. And you just read it directly off the story on air. That's what we kind of had to do. We were drinking out of a fire hose on a really controversial story yesterday. That goes down, and it didn't take long until you had a lot of disputes and a lot of players, I wouldn't say dismissing completely, because nobody went point by point on the thing, but you saw some players coming out and contradicting that report, saying this is not the way that Addazio has treated us. This is not the way that Addazio has talked about this. He's taken this seriously. There were a few players' parents that were active on social media yesterday saying that this has not been their experience. But it's also one of those things where, okay, let's step back for a second and let's think about this. There's 100 players in a Division I college football program, okay? There are going to be those that are going to say this has not been my experience at all, and there are going to be those that are going to say, yeah, no, this is exactly what I experienced. There were 10 people that talked to the reporter at the Coloradoan who had this report. So, and it's like, there's been like a handful of players that have disputed these allegations. It hasn't been 80 of them that have just come out and said point blank, this is all a lie. The university today, the university president came out and said there will be a full investigation. We are digging into this. We need to know exactly what is happening, because clearly this is a really, really bad look for Colorado State. Look, Steve, as college football has been returning, okay, and the classic football ethos of play through the pain and all that kind of thing, like, it's not the least bit shocking to find out that a college football coach would view a global pandemic, a deadly virus, as, this is just something we got to play through, okay? To believe this is only happening at Colorado State would be insane. Of course this is happening at programs all over the country. Of course kids are getting pressured to ignore these kind of things. That's intuitive, right? We can all assume that is going on right now. But there have been situations that have happened at other schools. There has been, look at the Iowa thing, for example. Some guys have said, what, my experiences with parents and the coaching staff were very troubling. Other guys inside the program said this is not what we dealt with when we were at Iowa, so this is crap. So it's not surprising. I think what we can take out of the story so far is something happened, something wasn't good, and you better thoroughly investigate this thing. And if you find the slightest bit of evidence that players were either testing positive in practicing or experiencing symptoms in practicing and coughing out on the practice field, as was alleged in the story, in close contact to other players, then Steve Addazio can't keep his job. You got to fire the guy before he's even coached a game. You have to, if you find out that this is the case. But like with anything, investigate it and do a damn thorough investigation to try and find out what is going on.
And we have an interesting situation here because UNLV shares a stadium, Allegiant Stadium, with the Raiders. So I'll put it bluntly, depending on when they match up, UNLV and CSU, because it's a home game here in Vegas, should the Raiders let Colorado State in the building? I mean, there are a lot of things to take into consideration here, and essentially there's a landlord for UNLV, and if they find out, hey, one of the programs in the Mountain West Conference isn't taking this thing freaking seriously, we're going to have CSU potentially shut down the Raiders in the NFL?
It's funny that you bring it up through that context right there. We talked about it yesterday, and we spun it through this kind of cycle of, we looked at it as, okay, the rules that the ACC put in place, and it requires very transparent reporting, within 24 hours of kickoff of this is everything, here are all of our testing results for the week that we have now dealt with. And it puts the onus on the opponent. Do you want to play us this week? Do you feel as though this is safe? We've watched what's happened in baseball, and there have been a number of teams like the Yankees last week were just like, we don't want to play the Phillies. Hey, I don't want to get near those guys right now. Okay. Colorado State. Okay. I'm assuming that the Mountain West Conference, I don't have any insight on this, but I'm assuming the Mountain West Conference would put some kind of protocols in place similar to what the ACC did. Who's trusting Colorado State right now? Who's trusting those guys? Who is the coach and who is the athletic director and who is the university president that says, no, I think it's safe for us to go out and breathe all over each other against Colorado State? This just plants a seed of doubt in everybody's mind on this. To your point, the Raiders, of course they've got to worry about this stuff. Do we want to bring a program into our stadium? If you're any other school in the Mountain West, do we want to bring this program onto our campus, into a hotel, and experience the fact that we might not totally trust that these guys are on the up and up right now? This is a bad look for CSU. It plants a seed of doubt that you're not taking this nearly seriously enough. And if I'm an opponent of Colorado State, I'm watching this investigation very, very closely. But to your point, Steve, should the Raiders worry about this? Of course they should. UNLV should worry about this. Anybody that has CSU on the schedule this year should worry about this.
Last one with Nate Kreckman, Altitude Sports Radio. So Mountain West Conference has announced 8 conference games, 2 non-conference. Am I safe in assuming that 75% of the non-conference games will be road games? Mountain West Conference teams will probably be traveling. And from there, I wonder what parents and kids think of that, because reality is the Power 5 schools, they ain't leaving home.
Right.
And it's going to be the group of 5 that help fill the schedule. So it's, it's a weird situation. It's like, I couldn't get a scholarship, or I left a Power 5 school, and now I have to be in more jeopardy than Power 5 players because I have to go on the road.
Yeah, so I would assume everybody's calling up the Big 12 to be like, if you guys have one non-conference game, we would love to be that. But, the problem that the Mountain West has is everybody from the American, everybody from Conference USA, everybody from the Sun Belt. Some of these programs are closer geographically to the Big 12 schools, and so it might be easier for them. The Pac-12 has said they're not playing any non-conference games, so if you're the Mountain West, everyone's calling BYU, right? Hey, you guys lost 5 games, so we would love to play you this season. I think Utah State, San Diego State, there might be one other Mountain West school that is already on their schedule. BYU and New Mexico State essentially become Mountain West schools this upcoming year now in order to be able to fill out those schedules. Yeah, everyone's going to call up the Big 12, but it's going to be tough. It's Thunderdome out there right now to try and fill out a schedule. I don't know how you get 2 non-conference games. Like, obviously Air Force is fine. They'll play Army and Navy. Everybody else, it's just like, good luck. It's going to be so difficult just to be able to fill out a schedule in the Mountain West. And last time I checked, New Mexico still had a mandatory quarantine, so I don't know how the Lobos play this year. Southern California is still a disaster, so I don't know how San Diego State fills out their schedule this season. Yeah, it's announced the schedule. I'm excited to see it. I want to see what it looks like, and I'll knock on wood and hope just like everybody else, but let's acknowledge this Herculean task that is facing Craig Thompson.
We need football, no doubt. We need football, but do it safely. Nate, you're the best, man. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it, man.